So let's go back to the beginning of chapter 2. פרק ב'. בנקודת אחד הבירורים בזה הוא, כמובן בכמה דרושים, שהשכר דגן עדן הוא על עסק התורה, והשכר דתחיית המתים הוא על קיום המצוות. Okay. So what's the difference? We said this already a few times. Gan Eden is the sachar, the reward for what one learns Torah in this world. And as we explained yesterday, after the neshama departs the body, it's easier to learn Torah. Right? Why is it easier to learn Torah? Because when we're alive, so on the one hand, we have a mouth, we can mouth it and we can think it. Right? When we don't have a brain, how do you think Torah? Right? So you think Torah. That's something we ended with yesterday. It doesn't mean that if you don't have a brain, that Torah doesn't exist. In the same way, that the fact that 1 + 1 = 2 doesn't care and doesn't matter whether there's somebody who's actually thinking it right now or not. Okay? It still stands. So the same thing by Torah, but Torah is a little bit different. Why is it different? Because it is constantly being thought not just by souls in a body, but souls outside of a body. So then you ask, how can you think of 1 + 1 = 2 without a brain? How can you think Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'haaretz without a brain? How could you? Settle. We'll see. But in the same way, the person understands. There's no screens. There's no distractions. Right? So there's plenty of time to think. So this is a whole topic about what does it mean to think without a brain. Right? Right. So in Chassidus there's a ton on this, because we never want to really limit thought to the brain. We want to say that the brain is the instrument through which our thought is manifest. That's how we said it yesterday. It's like a conduit, it's like a screen. It's like a screen on which it happens. So that what? So that we become aware of our own thoughts. That's the big chiddush, is that in thought, to really go more deeply, you have to be aware of what you're thinking.
So you're thinking about what you're thinking about.
Okay. So there's a few levels of that discussed in Chassidus, about how it could be that you're seeing the thought process, or you're even seeing the thought of the thought process, and so on. So by us, we see that there's a distraction. The main distraction is that we suddenly are aware that we're thinking. So from that you can learn that there is thought without self-awareness. That when a person is really deeply in a sugya, he doesn't feel himself at all. He doesn't need to experience his own thought. When he's really deeply in a sugya. That's the power of why we say in the end that the learning Torah is pnimi. It's pnimi because it's as if it can happen without the body. You don't need the chitzonius. You don't need the physical at all. And so that continues to happen in Gan Eden. And wherever a person was holding when he finished, so now he's free of the limitations of the body, and he can go more and more deeply into what he was thinking. He doesn't have to have self-awareness to continue thinking. In fact, most people will say, I think the deepest when I don't have any self-awareness. I don't need my self-awareness to do something. On the other hand, there's lower levels of thought where a person where you say to someone, "You az nechashamot ma shepicha omer." That the person is making mistakes, and so he has to have some self-consciousness of what he's saying. So we say to him, "Your ears should hear what your mouth just said," like Avram said to Terach, like we'll say in next week's parsha, or maybe it's actually in this week's parsha. It's before they left for Haran, so it's actually in this week's parsha at the very end. So he broke the idols, and Terach comes and says, who broke the idols? He said, the biggest idol got angry, and he broke all the little ones.
It's a midrash, it's not in the Chumash.
Okay, But that's the story of their having to leave Haran. Why did they suddenly leave Haran? The Medrash wants to explain, right, before Avram went to Canaan, so it says, Vayikach Terach et banav, or something like that, V'elechu arza Canaan, Vayavohu ad Haran vayishvu sham. So they wanted to go to Canaan. That's a whole, today they explain it geopolitically. It was a whole movement that was going on at the time of people from Mesopotamia moving to Ever HaNahar, to Eretz Yisrael. It was. That's what they say. So they were part of that movement. But he only made it to Haran. Haran is in northern Syria. Right? It's on the border with Turkey. You can see it on the map today. You go on Google Earth. See? It's actually in Syria, in Turkey. It's not in Syria. You can get there. And there's a place there called Jacob's Well. You know that. And you can see it on the map. You can see it on a picture of it. And it's one of the early tributaries of the Prat. It's one of the well springs of the Prat. In any case, so they went. Why did they go to Haran? Why did they ran away? So the whole story. Then because of that, the Nimrod wanted to kill Avram, and so on and so forth. In the end, they decided, miracle happens once. We don't know if it's going to happen twice. Yeah, let's get out of here. So they left. But Terach, what are you saying? I mean, idolatry is sort of like working on automatic thinking, like an autopilot. He said, if you think a little about what you're saying, you'll see that it doesn't really make sense. Okay? And that is usually why we need therapy. Right? Why do people need therapy? Because they're locked into their thinking. They're thinking. It's not that they're not thinking. They could have been in Gan Eden and thinking also. Okay? There's no difference. But they can't do the review. They can't do the criticism. The criticism for that you need to project what you're saying. You have to be able to see it. When you see it, then things begin to change because you see that, there's a mistake here, there's a mistake there. I don't really think this way. It just seems to me that I thought this way. And why does that happen? Because it's not really thought. If it was really thought, you wouldn't even need that. Because really, what is it? It's thought fueled by emotion. Okay? Is what we call the mochin shebalev. And most people, when they think, they're not thinking with real mochin. Real mochin don't need at all criticism. Okay? Real mochin is clear thought. I've said, there's what to say about that in a certain way, that the criticism comes from there being someone else, and he sees it differently, and that's basal. And then it's the elu velu divrei elokim chaim. We're not saying that one's right and the other's wrong. It's a different process of synthesis. It's more saying that one sees one side of it, the other one sees the other side of it, but it's not that one of them is wrong and the other is right. That's the way it is in the Metifta de Rekia, where the disputes here are not seen as one is right and one is wrong. Rather, they're seen as elu velu divrei elokim chaim, because there's different aspects to it. And the different aspects together make the whole. Okay? But it's not because it's criticism in the sense of you're wrong. That's real thought. Fake thought, or what we call thought down here, right? It's not fake because we all do it, but it's a substitute for the type of thinking you can do in Gan Eden. Is thought that actually comes from the emotions. It doesn't really come from the mind. And when it comes from the emotions, it's what we call, it's emotionally laden, it's emotionally crippled. And when the emotions are in a certain direction, it's very hard to think straight. You have to, so there you really need someone else. Because even you yourself, you can't criticize yourself. It's called En Chavush Motziat Mon Bet Asurim. Where's the Bet Asurim? The Bet Asurim is the heart. You're being held hostage by your emotions. So you can't think straight. So you have to talk to someone. And when you talk to someone, it helps them. That's why social work works. And that's why Pamonim works, and Mesilah works, and all these things that help people get out of their financial rut because they're wasting too much money on different things. And why? Because they're spending money emotionally. They're not spending it from their... If they would be able to control it with their mind, the mind's fine. The mind understands that this is the wrong thing to waste money on. So all of that's the Gan Eden. So Gan Eden also exists here. That's what we talked about, the Shalosh Shidduch. When you say a mimer from the Rebbe, you don't have to necessarily, criticize it and think about it. Divrei Elokim Chaim. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. What do you mean divrei Elokim Chaim? Divrei Elokim Chaim means it's Gan Eden. That's how we see it. It's pure thought. Pure. There's no need to question it. There's a famous story that after the Alter Rebbe said a mimer once, so Rabbi Isaac and someone else, they had an argument about what the Rebbe meant. Rabbi said one thing, and the other man said something else. So he said, in the end, we'll go to the Alter Rebbe, because they could, and we'll ask him which one he meant. So they went into the Alter Rebbe when they had a chance, and they asked the Alter Rebbe, who's right? So the Alter Rebbe sided with the other man, not with Rabbi Isaac. So after they left, he didn't say this in front of the Alter Rebbe, but the Alter Rebbe heard it later. He said, the Alter Rebbe is not a man de Amar here. He can't decide. He says, what do you mean? How can you say he can't decide? He says, when he says it, he doesn't say it in the place where we're arguing. He said it from Divrei Elokim Chaim. He's saying it the way it's being said in Gan Eden. What's the meaning? We can all argue what the meaning is. Because down here, we're all equal when it comes to trying to ascertain what the meaning of those words were. But when he says it, he's saying it like it's in Gan Eden. The Metivta Derekia. And the same thing is true, Shalosh Shidduch on Shabbos. Every Jew in Shalosh Shidduch of Shabbos can be in Gan Eden. What do you mean to be in Gan Eden? He learns a mimer, he reads, he says a mimer from the Rebbe. It's like he's in Gan Eden right now. He's just hearing the way that it's said in Shemayim. Afterwards, after Shabbos, he wanted to discuss what it meant. It was like this, like that. Yeah. That's why when you hear a mimer, you can be in Gan Eden, because you can just accept it the way that it is. Yeah, that's Gan Eden. The Litayim, what do they say? The Gan Eden is a stender. Right? Actually, they say Gan Eden and Genom are the same thing. It's a stender. It has a Gemara on it. For some people, a stender with a Gemara is a Gan Eden. For some people, a stender with a Gemara is a Genom. Okay. So it's not a Chaz v'Shalom. They didn't mean that there's Jews who don't enjoy Torah. What they meant is, right? What they meant is that there's Jews who would take it to such a degree of debate inside, they can't see Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim, they'll become like Gehenom. Gehenom is like this world, like Rav Nachman used to say. Well, that there's a Olam Haba, I don't know, right? We talked about that. Olam Haba, in the sense of the world of resurrection, doesn't exist yet. So I can't say I know. But that there's Gehenom, I know, it's right here. Rav Nachman said that once. That this is Gehenom. Gehenom I know exists. It's right here in front of me. I'm experiencing it almost every day, if not every day. Okay. Olam haba, Olam Atchiyah, that Ein lo ra'ata zolatcha Elokim. Nobody knows what that looks like. Okay. So you can take the Gemara and you can turn it into Gehenom. Why is it Gehenom? Because you're torn. It like becomes your life. Everything is shattered. There's one guy saying this, one guy saying this. What's the truth? Who knows? Instead of seeing it as all aspects of godliness, Hashem appears sometimes as success, and He appears sometimes as failure. You have to accept them both. Again, the way that the famous story about Reb Zusha and Reb Elimelech. People say that it's a true story, but it doesn't matter. It's one of the stories of whether it happened or not doesn't really matter, because the point is true, right? That they were thrown into jail one night. They wake up in the morning. Just as much as Hashem wants me to daven, now He wants me not to daven. Okay? Just as much as He wants this, He also wants that. You have to make a bracha on both, right? That's where it goes from.
You couldn't make a bracha there either.
What?
If you couldn't make a bracha there either.
Again, that's the point, that he couldn't make the bracha. And he said, but that's also Hashem's will. It's like Zusha knowing that whatever Hashem is showing me right now, that's what He wants. I told you the story about Alter Simchovich. And he was the first Mashpia Torah Semes when it was on Chov Najara. You know where it was. You know the building still exists. People think the building was destroyed. It's not true. The shul where the Rebbe Rayatz was still exists. It's called today the Breslov Shul. It's very interesting. You know, there was a time when Breslev, especially in Russia, was under Chabad. Most of them belonged, one way or another, whether they learned Reb Nachman or not, they belonged to Chabad because that was the Yiddishkeit that was around. So here the story is a little bit different. It was the yeshiva Torah Semes, and it's on Rehov Najara, and the Rebbe Rayatsky said a mimer there. He was there for a few hours, and it's interesting that the Lubavitchers don't go there because they don't know about this. That shul was built by Lubavitchers, but then for one reason or another they left. I don't know. I don't remember exactly the reason. It's on the internet now. You can find the story. And then the building, the big building where it was a bigger building. Next to it was demolished, and they built a 4-story apartment building,
That's where
which over the years became Bet Sefer Noam. There's a school there now called Noam for boys. It's a grade school. But the place where he said the Maimer is still a shul. It still exists there. It's attached to it. You see that it's not the same thing. It's like two different buildings, one attached to the other. There's actually even a passageway between them. So that's where the Rebbe Raya. So anyway, the Alter Simchovich was the mashpia there, and at the end of his life, he suffered terribly from. I guess he had cancer, because that's what it sounds like. But in 1929 or 20 or 30 or 31, when he passed away, there wasn't any diagnosis like that. They didn't really know. And he writes in his journals that how is it Hashem, I have to tell myself every day that even though Hashem recreates the world at every moment, He wants it the same. In this case, He wants it the same. Okay? Until He won't want it the same. Okay? There's a certain moment when Hashem decides, but now it changes. That's how things go away in the world. There's a certain moment. That's what they call time heals. They mean to say Hashem heals. They call it time. Okay, grandfather time. So what happens? Hashem at some point says, now I'm recreating the world with different feelings. Okay. Why is a person hurt for so many years when he has cancer, and then suddenly it goes away? And suddenly he feels good. Any disease. Or in Alter Simchovich's case, he was finished with the suffering, and he went to a world that's all good. Okay. He never recovered from it. Because there's a time that now it's over. Now it's time for it to be gone. So be gone. That's it. It's gone. And then the person wakes up the next morning and doesn't understand where it went. and you're afraid in the beginning. Try to reconstruct it. Do I still feel the way I felt? And it doesn't come. It's not there anymore. It's just gone. It's like, a new life. Okay? And that happens both in physical ailments and happens in psychological ailments as well, mental ailments as well. It's just suddenly it disappears. Okay, so that's all the olam. That's all the olam haba that we call Gan Eden. But what we call the world of resurrection, Tchias HaMeisim, that is for the mitzvos that we do. And now the Rebbe says something very interesting. That's why Gan Eden is the afterlife, souls without bodies. That's why we said that even the Rambam has to say that there will be bodies in the world of the resurrection. The Rambam has a side reason for it, a minor reason. Minor reason is that you can't give the reward to only the soul without the body, because the body also did something in life. So the world of resurrection has to contain the soul going back into the body. But we don't say it that way. Why? Because we say that it's a little bit of the same thing, because we're also saying that the reward for the mitzvahs that you did in this world has to also include the body. Why? Because the body did the mitzvahs. You can't do mitzvahs without a body. It doesn't make any sense. Okay? And even when you're learning Torah in Gan Eden, we said this yesterday, When the soul in the afterlife continues to learn Torah in the Gan Eden, it's not a mitzvah. Why is it not a mitzvah? Because you're not en akimat sfatayim, you're not saying anything. Or at the very least, you're not thinking anything. You're thinking, but you're not in this physical brain. So really the body, the whole concept of Chassidus is that the body is the vehicle for the mitzvahs. You can't really have mitzvahs without the body. What's the idea behind that? Because how did the Baal Shem Tov explain the mitzvah? He said it's shown tzavta, together. When it's only spiritual, there's no meaning to tzavta. Right? There's no meaning. Why? Imagine a flame. Could you say a flame, right, is made up of many flames? Only if each one of those other flames has a candle that's being joined together. There's no joining when you talk about something spiritual. Things don't join. They don't connect. They're always together. All the spiritual is one. There's different aspects to it, this and that, but you can't say joining. You don't bring things together. Only in the physical world can you really bring things together. We talked about that. That's the idea that the physical has extension, that it takes up space. So if it takes up space, by definition, it's not something else, because something else can't take up the same space. So when you join them, what you're saying is they come close together. That we call dveikus. Right? They're together. But the dveikus in the physical is not like the dveikus in the spiritual. The spiritual dveikus is mamish, it's one. It's being like one. So dveikus really is only theoretically is only in the spirit. But there's also dveikus of the bodies. When we say dveikus of the bodies, we mean that they're tzavta, they're together as much as they can. We mean that they try to lessen the distance between them. And the famous example of Rabbi Lazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, was very, very, very obese. And his wife was also. And they had many children. And the Roman who came to see them, it's Baba Metzia, right, in Pei Vav. So the Roman that saw them, it was some kind of magistrate. He said, how is it that you had children? He couldn't understand that they could even join together. So he told them, that the spirit, which is together, it can push away the physical. So most people see it like they understand that Rabbi Lazar is like a common man. So he says, we pushed hard enough against each other, we were able to have children. So no, it doesn't mean that. It means that it's that when there's true spiritual love, then the bodies don't play a role at all. It's like not here even. It's not that we pushed hard and we somehow found a way to have children. It's just when you have a real spiritual bond, the bodies don't play a role at all. They're not part of the story, right? Because that's what happens at the height of the connection between a husband and wife. That the bodies don't play a role. It's something much, much deeper. So anyway, כי עסק התורה שייך בעיקר להנשמה וקיום המצוות להגוף, like we said. וכיוון שקיום המצוות הוא בכל ישראל, ואפילו פושעי ישראל מלאים מצוות כרימון, לכן כל ישראל יש שם חלק לעולם הבא. And because mitzvahs are the entitlement of every single Jew does mitzvahs. There's no such thing as he doesn't. What does it mean? Is there a person who never did an act of kindness to someone else? There's no such thing. There's nobody who's so rotten to the core that not even once did he do an act of kindness. And you know what? Even if he did an act of kindness to himself, he ate. It's called mibsarcha lo titalam. It's this famous thing that even when you eat, says Hillel, kindness to the body. Okay, so there's a person who never did kindness. There has to be. So why do you say only the Jewish people are meleim mitzvot karimon? She said about every single human being. Because everybody else doesn't have the Torah. If you don't have the Torah, it's not a mitzvah. You're doing it. It has meaning, but it's not a mitzvah. You have to be commanded to enter, you have to be commanded with mitzvos in order for your actions to carry that meaning, that extra meaning, that I'm also doing what Hashem told me to do. And even if you didn't mean to, by many of them, we don't say mitzvot tzachot kavana. Or at least you can go according to the opinion that mitzvot are non tzachot kavana. There's an opinion like that in the diyun, in the sugya. Do mitzvahs need kavana, don't need kavana? We talked about it. Kavana means you can't just fall into the mikveh by mistake because somebody threw you in. But what if it happened? B'diavad, you did the mitzvah. The chatchila, no, but b'diavad can. That's why when we daven and we don't have kavana in the first bracha, so do we go back or not go back? We don't go back. Why don't we go back? Because b'diavad, it's good enough.
Because the second time is not going to be any better than the first time.
So that's already a teretz. But the truth is that b'diavad, it's okay. Okay, so we need to end. God willing, we'll continue tomorrow.
Yeah.
You're coming at 8?
No.
Not at 8.
Because I'm coming back from Chadera late. So I'm going